bilateral ties between India and Russia are extremely time-tested, reliable partnership, and we have shown that even during the course of these last few testing months. So our trade has actually shot up quite dramatically, and the trade has almost reached about $27 billion in 7-8 months of this year, starting April this year. Exports from Russia have reached almost 25 billion, and exports from India just about 2 billion. Now this is not very sustainable, so we have to work and see how can we make it more sustainable. We're all aware that our bilateral ties between India and Russia are extremely time-tested, reliable partnership, and we have shown that even during the course of these last few testing months. Our leadership has been in constant touch. They've had 5 telephone conversations, including one as recently as last Friday on the 16th of December. They met also, our Prime Minister met with President Putin in September in Samarkand, and I can assure you these exchanges will continue as we move into the new year. We had some important visits also subsequently. Our own Foreign Minister, our External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, was here in November, and he had some very useful interactions on the trade and economic sphere with Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Industry, Minister Manturov. They are co-chairs of what is called the India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission on Trade and Economic Cooperation. And our minister was accompanied by senior representatives from the Departments of Agriculture, Chemicals and Fertilizers, Shipping, Petroleum and Natural Gas, and from our Ministries of Finance. Obviously, the focus is how do we take our trade and economic relations further. Just to give you a little picture, last year, that is 2021-22, our bilateral trade was about $13 billion. Almost 9.5–10 billion was exports from Russia, and about 3 billion was exports from India. Now, what has happened this year, starting from April this year, is that our trade has grown substantially, and certainly in a large part due to much greater imports from India of crude oil and fertilizers, of course, which we were buying, but we're buying much more. Crude oil we were buying much less of. Now we're buying much larger quantities. So our trade has actually shot up quite dramatically, and the trade has almost reached about $27 billion in 7-8 months of this year, starting April this year. But while that is a very welcome trend, the fact is it has become too one-sided. So the exports from Russia have reached almost 25 billion, and exports from India just about 2 billion. Now this is not very sustainable, so we have to work and see how can we make it more sustainable. We've got to make it more balanced. Now, on the one hand, it seems fairly logical. There are lots of markets, there are lots of products which have now moved out of the Russian market, which were coming from other parts of the world, which I would suggest, and I would make a proposition that the Russian entrepreneurs should look for sourcing from India. There are many products that can be introduced here, not only the pharmaceuticals, which we have a strong presence, but which can come in much larger volumes, but also in agro-produce, whether it's fruits, vegetables, dairy, meat, auto components, machinery items, chemicals, ceramics. There is considerable demand for these in the Russian market, and I think if the entrepreneurs amongst you can get that message across that you need to look at getting much more, there would be a strong support from not just us, but of course from your colleagues in the embassy in Delhi and from our industry organizations. The reason I mention this is because we are also trying to see how much more trade we can do in national currencies. Now, the logic of it is simple. If you're doing trade in national currencies, you need to have a more balanced trade. Otherwise, one side accumulates too much currency of the other, and then you're stuck with what to do.